Peter is a street art badass from Amsterdam. I originally met him. He had created really a street art museum. I think it might have been the world's first street art museum. It was called Straat, which means street in Dutch, I found out. That was one of his first big accomplishments. We've been working together on projects for many years, different murals, installations, etc., for buildings and projects that I've done. Since then, he's gone on to work with other museums, curate street art, and in fact, many times has recently curated Pantone for us in Journal Square. So I think he's going to have a really interesting perspective on street art, community, business of art, and so we're going to talk to him about that. So Peter Coolen, welcome.
Thank you, David.
Let's just start about your background. Like, what inspired, how did you get into street art? How did you get interested in it? And what inspired you to create a museum, which seems really hard?
When I was a young kid, I was 12 years old, and then this documentary aired in the Netherlands. And back in the days, we didn't have cable TV, so it was all through the antenna. And in the Netherlands, we had like 2 channels. So everybody was looking at either the one channel or the other channel. You cannot imagine it today, but at that time it was. And me and my friends, we all saw this documentary called Style Wars, about the New York graffiti scene at that time, beginning of the 80s. And that blew my mind completely. It was so amazing to see all these kids painting trains in the middle of the night, and also their parents, some of them, they gave their view and opinion, and they were all against it, and they couldn't understand it, and that made it even better, So as a young kid growing up in the Netherlands, I saw some graffiti, but not at the scale and the development that we saw here in New York City. So that was my first impression of it. It really inspired me to pick up first markers and later spray cans to, to find my own voice and my own style.
Yeah.
When I was in high school, I got scouted by one of my teachers. So my teacher asked me to stay after class, and I was like, okay, what have I done wrong? So obviously I was a little bit afraid of what he's going to say, but he said, hey, Peter, I see you're drawing the whole class. You were not paying attention. You were only drawing in your on your papers. I said, yeah, I know, I'm sorry. And he said, well, actually, my wife is an interior designer, and she's looking for graffiti artists. And I was like, oh, so that's a different story. So that's how I got my first commission, through my English teacher.
The evolution of graffiti, right? It started out, it was super underground, right? It was really not just frowned on, it was illegal. Cops were going after it, right? Like, people went after it hard in the early years, right?
Yes.
And what was the turning point in that? Who were influential figures? And is there a moment in time that shaped differently?
Looking back, you can definitely see that there were some turning points in the perception, and mainly that was when graffiti writers developed into street artists, and that was the end of the 90s, beginning of the 2000s. Graffiti writers were developing from letters to more understandable imagery, if I can say it like that.
And what are the major differences between street art and, let's say, gallery art?
I think, to start with, how this art comes to life, either on the street or in the studio, is a totally other dynamic. I mean, in the street, you have all the risks that come with illegal painting. So you have to work fast. You have to be able to work in the dark, maybe, or on really harsh conditions. While in the studio, you can take ages, to create the art piece. So that's a totally different dynamic, which also is the difficulty also in translating that, vibe from the street into a piece that also is strong in a gallery context. So yeah, that's really the big difference in, and because these starting points are so different in conditions and context, you get a totally different art.
Right. Gallery art is like the last great spin game, right? Yeah. It's like an unregulated market that a ton of money pours into. Insiders have an enormous advantage. Money laundering goes on in that art industry, right? It's one of the last places you can actually put millions of dollars into an object that you can then take around and then, is worth those millions of dollars in another place, right? Street art doesn't have those same characteristics. Do you think that part of the kind of like appeal originally to the artist was like about the purity of that, the fact that it is temporary and transient. You can't really take it, or
Yeah.
how do you look at that
Yeah,
statement?
it's also, as an artist, it gives you another relationship with your art. You know that the moment you turn your back when you painted a piece in the street, it's property owned by the street, so anything could happen to it.
Hmm.
So you have to, yeah, you have to understand that relationship and be okay with it to be able to
Yeah.
paint in the streets. If you go around like, oh, they painted over my piece and be sour about it for weeks, that's not going to benefit your life as an artist.
How's AI gonna affect street art?
Oh, that's an interesting one. I mean, well, first of all, I think AI can also help an artist develop ideas really fast. You know, also to visualize ideas maybe fast, but you have to know how to. It's also a tool. You know, you have to know how to use it. It's not like if you give somebody a hammer, he's not a carpenter. You know, you
Mm.
have to know how to handle the hammer and the nail and how to, you know, work with the wood and everything. Yeah, you can look at it from two ways. I mean, recently was a lot to do about the fact that AI got trained by just taking learning from what other artists put, or what physical
Yeah.
human artists put online, and they train the AI models to, you know, work with that. And basically that's a really weird development. I mean, we have to, as a society, think about what the implications are of, because it doesn't only affect the street art world; it affects many creative domains, or all the creative domains. Um, because yeah, of course, these models have to be trained from something, and I think there's a lot of experts that warn us for the dangers of AI. People say like, maybe the AI will flood also, you know, the internet with information or with visuals, and then learns from these visuals as well. So it becomes a self fulfilling, I don't know what, but
Hmm.
loop kind of thing.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm not an expert on the AI field, but I'm watching it, and I'm a little bit worried. I'm also excited, but that's maybe two sides of the same medal.